Okay, well, hi everyone. Thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Harvey back with you today with another episode of Simply Inspired, presenting champions for the Simply Inspired podcast. Today is episode 444. So, today I'm joined by a very special guest who has an amazing story to tell. Roller coaster life, incredible message of hope and inspiration. Today's guest, Nigel Whitear, a veteran champion of over 300 fights, world champion, the founder of Loud Impact, has an amazing story recovering from prison time, recovering from a crazy lifestyle, turned his life around to become the man that he is today, and is now sharing the message of hope and inspiration with others. As always, with my interviews, we will be talking about the fights, we'll be talking about some of the prison stuff, we'll be talking about some of the gritty things, but we'll also be going a bit deeper than that, and I'm going to be sharing some messages with you guys that Nigel wants to share to help you, the viewers, in your life to make a positive change, get your life moving in a positive direction. Maybe if you know someone who's struggling in one way or another, I hope there'll be some tips and inspiration in here to help them as well. So stay tuned, everybody. And Nigel, mate, thank you very, very much for making the time for this, by the way. I really appreciate it. And it's good to have you here. I know you've been feeling really rough, so just appreciate you being here today, mate, to be honest.
Do you know what, Liam? Thanks for the invite, mate. It's a bit nerve wracking for me actually. It's only my second podcast ever, and I heard you're on 444, and I got a real thing about angel numbers and stuff as well. So that was meant to be. No, it's just good to be invited on, mate, and hopefully it helps others to realise if I can change, anyone can change.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the aim of the game, and that's why I call it simply inspired. Inspirational stories. I like my interviews to be very chilled, very relaxed, so nothing to worry about. As long as you're talking from in here, everything else will fall into place. Angel numbers, I hear you 100%. Mine is usually the three sevens. I usually get, but I also get the 1111 as well. That's a whole other story. But big believer in that as well. So I'm sure that'll come up in due course. But before we get into those kind of things, talking about a little bit about your early life, when you sent me a little bit of stuff about your life, and when I was reading up on this, you were saying that your life has pretty much been a fight from day one. So I'd actually like to go back in time for a minute and just start there if we can, mate.
Okay, well, this is there might be people out there that know me that don't know this story, and what I decided to do with regards to obviously being on here was I thought, you know what, let's just lay the land out completely because there's people that know me that don't fully know me, and maybe this might make a little bit more sense as to. I mean, it definitely helped me with regards to trying to understand myself as to maybe why I would do things, how I would do things, the process behind it, and everything else. So, for those of you that know me, that do know me and haven't heard this, hopefully this will explain a little bit more about it. So, I'm adopted, and I was adopted into a lovely family. But prior to being adopted, I was actually what you would class as a love child. So laying it completely out there, in some weird way, my dad should have been my uncle, or my mum should have been my aunt, or something like that. I don't know how you want to word it. So there was a bit of a wife swap scenario that went on. The ironic thing is they were twins. So one didn't look any more different to the other one. So I don't know what there was to gain, other than maybe the joy, not the joy, the risk of getting caught or whatever. But anyway, so then went into care, um, and this bit's quite important, I feel, especially for this time of year. It's taken me years to fully understand why genuinely I don't like Christmas. I would go so strong as to say some years I hated it. And I spoke to my biological family afterwards, and one of them was my sister. I won't name her, but one of them was my sister. And she explained to me, she shed some light as to why I might not like Christmas. And it was the first Christmas I ever had. I was upstairs. So bearing in mind March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. So I'd have been 9 months old, and I spent the whole time in my cot in a pooed up nappy. She had to come up and feed me, as in my sister. She had to come up, so I wasn't part of the festivities of Christmas, and that was obviously my very first one. So not only would I have been um, involved in the pregnancy side of it for the first Christmas, then on my first Christmas whilst being born, it was not a very good time for me, especially as a child and especially as a newborn. So I think subconsciously that's part of the reason why I really genuinely don't like Christmas. Um, and then from that moment into care, few things happened whilst in care, marks on the face, all that sort of stuff, you know. Rumours were that I'd been pushed downstairs, maybe off a sofa or whatever else. And at such an early age, that's obviously detrimental to growth. However, I was lucky enough that my mum and my dad came and saw me and basically picked me out like a puppy. Maybe that's where the Pitbull name came from. I don't know. It wasn't, but anyway. And I've got to stop saying Why do I keep doing that? It's ridiculous, isn't it? So anyway, so they picked me out, and I then went into my new family, and yeah, so that's up to, and it was 28 months old roughly. I thought it was 21, but I found out recently it was about 28 months old that I was officially a Whittier, not who I was before. So
Okay, so that's where the story begins. I gotta say before we go any further, Nigel, mate, yeah, I mean, I respect the courage that it takes, mate, to speak out about this type of thing because I know it's part of what you do anyway. You get the message out there. I know that, but seriously, I mean, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of heart to get on here and tell people because you're saying like people who know you, maybe they don't know this side of the story, but then you're also saying like some people be hearing this for the first time, and it surprises me sometimes when people come on, especially fighters, and they say, "Oh, I get nervous before doing it." And I think, well, how is that? Because you get in the ring and you're going to battle with somebody. But actually, I totally, totally, totally respect the courage and the balls and the heart that it takes to put this type of thing out there. I just want to say that before we go on any further. So when you're saying like, "Oh, why am I saying no?" or not? Well, because you're talking about like the rawest part of your life and what made you the man you are today. And I hope that that has a healing effect on you as well as on other people who are listening to this. So, and every question I ask, by the way, is framed from that point of view of like, okay, who's this going to help? How's it going to help them? Everything like that. So, great job so far. Now, obviously, you mentioned at this point, you were saying about the Pitbull name there, you were talking about that side of things, and some of the anger started to build in you at a young age as well, which from where I'm sitting has obviously caused you some damage in your life, but it's also helped you in your life and made you maybe a successful fighter. So we'll come into that a bit deeper. But in terms of where that started and that drive to do battle with people at a young age, where did that come from? Because that was something that featured very strongly in the notes that you sent to me, in your bio. So
anger, that's where it came from.
yeah.
Anger. And I couldn't control my anger, and I didn't realise at a young age like that, at 5 years old. I mean, the first time I felt like my heart was broke was at 5 years old, and I remember it plain as day. And parents involved and adults involved go, no, it wasn't like that. I know because I was that 5-year-old child what happened. And it's like you ask your dad, oh, can so and so come in? Your dad goes, no. So you go, all right, I'll go and ask mum. Mum will let him in. So I went and asked mum, and mum went, yes. I was like, yes, 5 years old. And I think it was one of the first times a friend had been allowed in. And as I've gone to walk past my dad, I remember I had these hideous, burgundy, disgusting looking dungaree type things on. And he's grabbed me by the back, swung me around, and gone, whack. And I remember from the front door landing on the first step to the stairs, which at that time felt like a million miles away. In all seriousness, it was probably 2.5 meters. But as a 5-year-old child, that couldn't have been any further away, short of punching me up the stairs. So my heart just broke because I was like, how can someone I look up to, and again another male, how can someone I look up to hurt me like that? I was all confused. I mean, this is how I'm thinking of it now. As a child, I can't really explain what I felt. So I was like, okay. And then it happened a lot of other times as well. So from an early age, my dad taught me the way you deal with things is through violence. So I was like, okay, cool. I witnessed a lot of family. I'm going to be very careful what I say, just to not affect too many people from my family's point in safeguarding. A lot of family issues occurred around my dad, and so again, all it done was enhance the violent side. And again, it built up this anger, this anger, this anger, this anger. Then I watched my dad involved in road rage, so I've struggled with that in my past. But everything was built around anger. And I remember one day someone said to me, "Well, fighting, Nigel, is a universal fucking language, isn't it? Every fucker understands a punch in the face. You haven't got to translate that." And I was like, "Okay, cool. I actually kind of get what this guy's saying about." But I got kicked out of school and excluded a couple of times. and but I just couldn't. I mean, I was always clever, I wasn't stupid at school. I'd done really well in my exams and stuff like that. But there was always this anger. So right up until the first year of senior school, I was fighting all the time. I had teeth out. I had, believe it or not, I had blonde curly hair. So I ended up getting called Goldilocks and ended up having major punch ups in junior school. And then got through to the first year of senior school. I had 89 detentions, most of them for fighting. And then I remember one day looking at my mum and seeing her heartbreak in her, as if to say, "I'm trying, Nigel," and she did the whole way through. Bless her, couldn't have asked for a better mum. Um, and it made me want to change. So then, year 8, I then became the most improved student in the whole school. I had 2 detentions in the whole year. But then, what it done then, it flipped. So where I was angry all the time and wanted to just go at everyone, I then went, I can't deal with it that way, and I became bullied. So then, subconsciously, I was then getting more and more angry because I was allowing myself to take a kicking, and I wasn't realizing it at the time. But then I started to misbehave in other ways, and I started to piss about at school, and I started to do things that I wouldn't normally be doing. Obviously, I was fighting, but I was always good in other areas. So anyway, so then I started to make a list as I got, and this went right the way through to the end of school. So 4 years of being bullied. And in year 10, I fought back. And there was a guy called Alan Metered, we used to call him. I mean, honestly, his head was the size of a 70-inch TV. It was huge. But it was like a sledgehammer. He just headbutted everyone. And he headbutted me. So I nutted him back. And I realised I've got these little horny type things here, like the devil trying to come out. Or some would call them 2 dickhead horns, whatever you want to class it as. And I remember headbutting him and I see his head split. And I was like, oh, here we go. Oh, yes. And then everything came back and I got pulled off of him. And then I started to get red rage or red rag or whatever you want to call it. And then when I fought, I didn't know what I'd done. I think because I've got all this pent up aggression now I genuinely didn't give a. Can we swear on here? I think it's the only way to say it. I didn't give a fuck. I was like, right, now I don't care who you are. I don't care who you think you are because people go to me, oh, you're a big lad. People I thought I'm tiny because I've never picked on someone small. Not that I picked on anyone, but I never fight anyone smaller than me. For some reason, I always used to pick fucking giants. And we went over to Holland to play football. We was not representing England in that sense, but representing England over there anyway. And I picked on this, and when I say picked on him, football, you give little nudges and all that sort of stuff, don't you? And this geezer must have been about 6'4", but he was equally just as wide as what I was. And we ended up having a tear up on the pitch. He's hit me. Oh my God, at that point, I'd never been hit so hard in my life. But I still wouldn't stop. I was fueled by anger, absolutely fueled by it. And this carried on and this carried on and this carried on. And I got into kickboxing and I was undefeated in over 300 kickboxing fights. I mean, bearing in mind, these aren't all pro fights. Some weekends you're fighting 7 or 8 times a day. So, only like continuous bouts, but nevertheless, I'd never lost, never ever lost. And I did have one kickboxing fight later on with a guy called Danny, can't remember his name, from ZT Fight School. And he spiked me clean out. So that was fair play to him. But anyway, but throughout that, so I was like, yeah, I found something I'm really, really good at. And then I got to. Are you happy for me to just talk? Because if you are, then
I'll chip in at certain times to take it in certain direction. But at the moment, you're in a really good flow, and I'm just listening because remember what I said earlier. Talk from the heart and everything, and that's what you're doing. But yeah, I was going to ask you that anyway, mate. I mean, like obviously the anger going from a negative direction into like a positive direction and everything. I think is an amazing thing. I mean, that's a good lesson. So I don't forget to say really good lesson as well about how you got there. Not so much with the kickboxing now, but I'm saying about all the fighting at school and stuff. Because a lot of kids, they looked at very judgmentally. They looked at being bad kids and this and that. And listen, when I was at school, I had all this stuff like ADHD and this label and that label thrown at me. And I remember my mum fighting it and saying, look, we're not saying that about him. We're not putting him on any of these meds. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. But even the labels affect your self-esteem. So I think it's a powerful lesson for youngsters out there who are struggling in that way. They're not bad kids. They're mostly just been conditioned in that sense, like what you were saying, with your dad there. So yeah, I mean, coming into kickboxing, okay, 300 fights, yeah, absolutely. And you've had MMA fights, you've had everything. So I want to take this into some of the highlights of your fighting career as well, and some of your favorite moments, I should say.
That's fine.
Only because it's a heck of a lot to kind of condense down into 2 minutes because you've had so many experiences. But I do want to touch on a couple of your favorite ones as well. But just so we don't forget that, but yeah, carry on in the direction you were going, mate, because I love it.
That's right. I can step into that now. What I want to do you want me to talk about the fights first, then get into the drug side of things,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
the
yeah.
drugs first, then get into the fighting? Because
Let's
they
talk
do
about.
mix at some point.
Well, we'll talk about both, but let's talk about the fights a minute, just because
Okay,
of
cool.
the
Yeah,
underlying reason of like channeling the anger, and I want to talk about
yeah,
that subject, and then we'll go into a couple
yeah,
of other
sweet.
things. Yeah.
Okay. So my first pro fight was in 2003 officially. A guy called Stephen Hughes, and that was up in I want to say Nottingham way. But we had the Butler brothers, and um, that was the first sort of time. Actually, as a pro, that was my first fight. But I had a couple of. They didn't really have amateur back in 2002 when I started. It was just sort of go in and you have a tear up. And I'd got my black belt with Shaolin Tigers by this point. And to have part of your black belt and part of your grade as you progress, especially into the dans and all that sort of stuff, was you had to have a ground game. So I started to discover really quickly I actually really like fighting on the floor. And I think it was still fueled by anger at this point. It was I can snap something on someone and know that I could get away with it legally. So that was still again being fueled by that, and it fascinated me. Excuse me, absolutely fascinated me. So then I progressed on, and then I had a fight. And my first proper fight was on FX3, and it was 2004. And I mean, you still see I've got the you can see I've got the Shaolin Tigers tattoo there. So that's where everything started. And so Frank, the guy that runs Shaolin Tigers, he said to me, right, we've got a fight with a guy called Laurent Bonifu. And I was like, okay. And when I looked into it, Laurent Bonifu had fought someone that had just come off the UFC. And I went, fuck it. What's the worst that can happen? I ain't bothered. I'll fight anyone. I ain't bothered. And I remember coming out. Frank hadn't warmed me up. I had someone else warm me up. Frank just came out as because I'm his meal ticket into MMA and all that sort of stuff. I remember coming out with this stupid fucking pink towel on my head. I don't know what I was thinking. I've walked out and I see the size of this guy and I thought, fucking hell, here we go. All right. Bollocks, let's go. Let's have it. So I've got in there, was standing there for and I went, whoa. And I went to throw this big wild left, and all of a sudden my legs went from underneath me and I'm on the deck. And I went, okay, here we go. And he got me in positions I didn't even know existed. But I managed to escape, and I managed to escape, and I managed to escape. And then he got me in a chicken wing, and I turned the wrong way, and then he snapped my own fucking shoulder and elbow. So the fight got stopped anyway. And then after the fight, Frank goes to me, "How the fuck could you lose?" And I went, "What? You heard me? How the fuck could you lose? You're an embarrassment." Well, that was it then. I thought I was angry before. Now I would have fought 10 men at once. I was furious. So the next fight, and this is why it's quite important to word it like that, because the next fight was only a week later, and it was on the only King of the Cage to ever come to the UK, and it was up in anyway up north, and it was at an ice arena. No, that was not an no, it weren't. Anyway, and I was fighting a guy called Jason Simpson, and he was a nice guy, which actually fueled me even more because I'm like, he's introducing me to his family when we're at the event and all this, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna punch your fucking head in. Why are you inviting me to your family, you retard? What's going on? And I take that back, Jay. You are a nice guy. So anyway, got to the fight, and I'm so angry by this point because of what had happened only a week before, and I felt like I let myself down. That's the other thing as well. So I'm angry because I know I can fight better than this. And by the end of the fight, I broke his jaw, nose, eye socket, 3 ribs, and cracked his collarbone. That fight should have been so. This is what I mean. So I've got all this anger leading up to now, and then I've had a load of fights in between this time, and I found myself becoming a gym whore. I was just training anywhere I could because, again, you say about ADHD, very much a similar thing. I'd get what I thought I could get out of that. All the fireworks had gone off in my head. Right now, I need to go somewhere else. Now I need to go somewhere else. Now I need to go. So I was constantly moving about. I didn't realise how important having an actual team behind you was. I thought it was Nigel against the world, and that's how I went off. So then I got the opportunity to go and train in America with Pat Miletich, and I went out and I trained at there with a guy called Charlie Francis for 2.5 weeks, and that made me realise just how good I actually was. But not from an anger point of view for this. Although the fight I was having was against Jason Barrett when I got back, who had illegally given me a shot on an ultimate on a cage rage type event, and he busted up my jaw. So I was then livid. So I've gone to America, trained out there, and had a fight in a titty bar out there. That was the weirdest thing in the world, let me tell you. You got a mud wrestling in one, you got them in a swimming pool in the middle, and I'm in the ring in the middle going, what on earth do I do here? Whack! Oh, now I remember, let's go. And we're in. And that was for a tournament to go and fight on Rumble in the Rock, which was BJ Penn's show at the time. And I beat the guy, but I never got to go to Rumble in the Rock because I didn't do the prelims and whatever else. But anyway, that was fun. So then I got into that. But then that really did make me understand how important a fight camp is. But more importantly, I started to understand how aggression needs to be controlled. It's okay to be aggressive in the right setting and in the right way. But something that I forgot that's really fundamentally important in this whole journey of mine was prior to getting into MMA was why. Why did I go from kickboxing to MMA? Now, what's the side of it with regards to what I'd said about the grading? But a very good friend of mine, Chris Ballard, he was super heavyweight world kickboxing champion. And we worked the door together for years. And he goes to me, Nigel, you're a fucking head case. He said, you know what? I've got just a sport for you. I went, what? He said, you get paid, you don't get arrested, and you get to beat the shit out of everyone that you want on the floor or stood up. And I went, perfect, show me the way. So it was led by my anger. So anyway, so stepping back forwards now I've realised controlled aggression is quite important. And even my entrance tune was so aggressive that I was coming out to at the time. It was Trinity, Blade, ready to die. I was born ready, motherfucker. And I can't even hear it now. I'm thinking, yeah, let's go. But that wasn't good because then I'm getting to the cage. I wanted to kill everyone. So then I started to progress through in my years. And, I started to do a lot more training. Then I went to prison. And this is then when the new Nigel started to slowly creep back in. The new Nigel started to flow itself back in, and going to prison. I don't know if you want to touch on that a bit more later on, but going to prison.
This, sorry to cut in there, mate. I want to touch on this as well because it's a really important part of your story. Again, there's a lot of lessons in here, and you were saying earlier about like the drug side of things, and you mentioned there about working on the door and other stuff. So there's obviously like other things that were in your life around this point as well. And I want to give people the context for that again, because you've learned the lessons, and again because the transformation and everything that you've been through, like now sitting with you now to like sitting with you then. I mean, it must be massive. I get the vibe. It's like a massive difference in like how you've grown as a person. I mean that as a big compliment, and that's what I want to show people. So yeah, I mean, coming into like the prison stuff, the drug stuff, the door work, like some of the other things you were into. It's not to dwell on anything bad, but it's just to show people like how you've changed, as you said at the beginning, and as you said in what you sent me as well. Like if you can change, anyone can change. I mean, that's actually what I want to show people. That's the whole thing about the message. But to give people the context of that, what were some of the things that you were kind of getting into around this type of time? I mean, sounds like you're a bit of a bad boy and you did a few naughty things. No judgment there, but I want to just touch on give people the idea because then that leads to how you change. Do you know what I'm saying? And it also leads back. Sorry, one other thing to what you were saying earlier, where the same thing with the prison system. A lot of guys they're not bad guys. They just, it's the conditioning, it's the upbringing. A lot of it's trauma. It's unhealed trauma. There's a lot of things that people don't understand about this. So I want to go into that. But before we get into that, yeah, I mean, what was some of the stuff you was getting into basically?
Well, where I was saying to you about I had all this aggression and the only way I could deal with it was through, and it wasn't just some of this aggression was fueled by unanswered questions. Why am I built this way? And by this point I hadn't met my biological family, so I didn't know what had happened previously. So I had all these, am I like them? Are they like me? I had all these unanswered questions. How could you give up your own kid? What the fuck is going on with you? Why would you do that? So they had all this aggression as well, but then with having the ADHD, which again has never ever been diagnosed, but I know I've got it 100%. I had so many fireworks going off in my head that I couldn't calm my head down, which gave me no time to actually think about anything. And the impulsive side of me just ruled. And I would act and I'd think about it afterwards. And then I've been selling drugs, I've been around drugs, I've been involved in that sort of lifestyle. But I didn't actually start taking coke until I was 22. And it was due to basically it was peer pressure. You know, it's my own choice. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking that. But all of a sudden, I've gone through my whole life hating drugs, not doing drugs, to now 20 years down the road, seeing the devastation it's caused in my own life and others and other people's lives that I love and other people's lives that I've met along the way. So then with that came debt, came loss of life, came loss of relationships, came relationship changes, 4 kids to 4 different mums. So what I say is impulsive. I'd have a 3 year hitch. So much, and I'm not going to overwhelm people, but so much went hand in hand with the addiction. But the one thing that the addiction did that's good, because let's face it, we don't wake up one day and go, today I'm going to fuck my life up. It doesn't work that way. It's a process. And I didn't realize how much the cocaine was creeping in because I know I used to be a dry sniffer. So it wouldn't have been like it was the drink like it was before I went to prison this time. It was, I would just sniff. But then what it done is, where I've got all this chaos going, I've got this fire, I had nothing. Absolutely nothing. And even now, just thinking about it, it's like, what are you thinking about? Nothing. It's brilliant because my head was just a million miles an hour. So people are under this impression that to take cocaine, where it's that sort of stimulation of a drug, you get it to just go, yeah, and you're bouncing off the walls. Bollocks. It's not the case at all. I was speaking to someone else today, a very good friend of mine, and he has done it for the same reason I did. We were just discussing about the ADHD. So there's a lot of medical reasons as to why people use. What we don't expect when we first start that pattern is how it then takes over our life. Because addiction is a behavior, it's not a thing. So it's not just like, for example, I enjoyed being able to get a pack. So I started buying pork scratchings. I enjoyed the risk of getting caught. So I started drinking little miniatures. Do you know what I mean? There's a process to everything that we do, good or bad, in this world. So I then saw how devastating the drink and the drugs have become. And it got to 2018. And it was the last time to this point that I'd used. And it was on a day with my brother, God rest his soul, that he said to me, Nigel, moving up to Scotland. Anyway, long story short, I knew what do you want to drink then? Do you want to drink, man? Should we go and get a shit face, get on it and stay on it all night? Now, I went there. I was supposed to be getting my daughter's school uniform that day. And long story short, I fucked up again after having a little break from it as well. I fucked up again, let her down. But then I had what they call a near-death experience. So I'd sat in the car park and I'd driven to a bridge. And I looked over the bridge and I thought, yeah, that's high enough. That is high enough to end all this pain, all this suffering in one jump. I'm game. Let's do it. Got up on the bridge, balanced, about to step off, and I couldn't. It was like I was stepping on an invisible platform. And then I heard a voice saying, no, Nigel, you've got way too much to offer. Or you got much more to offer, or something to words to those effect. And then bang, I was back in the car and I was in the car park. So I was like, wow. So from that moment on, my life changed because I knew that there was more to life than all this crap that I'd been involved in. And then that's when I started up Loud Impact. And that was back in 2018. And Loud Impact, the reason I wanted to get into that is because I had no positive male role model. Every man in my life let me down. I got raped at 8 years old, from a male. So I had all these things happen in my life. And again, we could do 7 or 8 podcasts and still not touch on what's happened in my life. So this is me really trying to condense it all to try and save you a bit more of a job. So what I started to do, I started to go into the schools and I'd use fitness. So I'd done a Ricky Hatton training course and I started to use boxing exercise to go into the schools to do 45 minutes training with them and then have a discussion for 15 minutes at the end. And do you know what? There's one young lad now, he's not so young, and he said those chats changed his life. He doesn't realise still to this day that it's him that made the changes. He tries putting it my way. And I went, no. All I was that person to listen. And do you know what? Liam, when I say this, mate, you'll know this yourself. And anyone out there listening to this, it could take that one conversation to really make a difference. Or that one set of ears just to go, it's okay, I'm here. And I never had that. My mum was great. Don't get me wrong, but she can't be mum and dad, and dads can't be mum and dads. It's as simple as that, and it's not a sexist thing at all. But all the young people I dealt with, female or male, mind, every single one of them didn't have a positive male role model because I was dealing with the naughty kids, what you were talking about earlier. There's no such thing. There's misguided, like you said, or there's stuff going on. Kids don't just
Absolutely.
act out for no reason. There's always a reason behind it.
Absolutely. I'll chip in there. I'll come back to Loud Impact now, but yeah, I want to go deeper into that topic because I feel so strongly about it, by the way. Even like what you were saying earlier about the drugs and, the effect on, shall we say, a neurodiverse brain. Let's put it that way because I don't like labels. It's different maybe than the effect on a normal brain. But I also want to go deeper into something else because, look, we're talking here like 300 fights, right? But then we're talking about like some of the other stuff you were doing. So as I understand it, you've got like debt collecting, bouncing, and drug dealing, like the door work and drug dealing, right? And what interests me about that is not so much that stuff, it's actually the fact that when I've worked with some of the, the toughest, most violent, most aggressive individuals, there's always actually the vulnerability underneath every single time, right? So what you were saying there, and usually I'm really glad you mentioned that, by the way, about the sexual abuse side of things. I'm not going to go into that too much because I know how difficult it is to get into, but the relevance of that level of, vulnerability and the dominance and the stuff that happens and the way it makes you feel, is there so frequently with the so-called naughty people, whatever. And it doesn't have to be that; it can be physical. But I had this conversation a few months ago with with Jeff Thompson, the author Jeff Thompson. I had this. He was on the show with me, and he was talking about like sexual abuse, what happened to him and like how it changed the course of his life forever, being a doorman, being like everything that happened to him afterwards. And I was thinking like, wow, because people look at people like in your situation, people who haven't been there, people who haven't understood it, or people who would have seen you, like if someone remembers you like on the door or somebody remembers you selling drugs and they see you to where you are now and like the healing that you've done. And I love that because I've seen it over and over and over, even with like the toughest men in the world, even with people I don't even know. I mean, even with something like, you look at Mike Tyson, like the most, however you rate Mike Tyson, and I don't want to get into like the prime Tyson thing because that's for casuals. That's for casuals. But I'm talking about the man now, the man, yeah. He had one of the most intimidating auras, like in terms of a lot of people were defeated before they ever got in the ring with him. And then you look at his childhood and you think, fucking hell, like that's this guy, what he went through and everything. And it seems to always be that like the people who have the vulnerable experiences, when they're too young to basically defend themselves, like when you were 5 years old. I mean, what can you do about that? And then they build up the armor of like, being some of the toughest men in the world. But underneath it, there's often like unhealed, there's still the little boy in there, a lot of times. And I'm not saying that with disrespect. I'm saying that with like the healing. What role do you think that aspect plays in, because you've been in prisons, but then I also need to mention here that you've got like 20 different qualifications. You said to me, and you're like on the boards with the prisons, and that shows as well, by the way, how intelligent a lot of these kids are, including yourself, when they're in these situations. But nobody sees that. They're always looking at the behavior. They're never looking at, they got academic potential, creative potential, physical, potential. And I want to go deeper into that aspect of like the toughest men often have some of the worst wounds. And I know this is kind of a weird line of reason, but I feel it's so misunderstood and it stands out to me. What are your thoughts on that side of things, if that all makes sense, mate,
You know what, you've absolutely nailed it there, mate. And someone that I've spoken to is a very good friend of mine, and his words to me were, and he's fought in Afghan, he's fought all over the place. He was a he was a boxer in the army. He come out, he done boxing when he come out. He's a bit of a, for want of a word, bit of a gangster type sort of guy. Knows some really nasty people, and he said, no one in this world will ever be able to hurt me again like my dad did.
Yeah.
So when you're that damaged, which a lot of, and he joined the army to get rid of his PTSD, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, especially from a male perspective, is we tend to be taught you can't cry, you can't show emotion, deal with it this way. The only way you can deal with it is get your fucking hands up, go at them. My dad, I got jumped once at the shops. by a load of lads. My dad went, Mike, get the fuck back there, let's go and deal with them then. Which actually, in a weird way, was kind of a good lesson to have at that stage because of the area I'd grown up in and whatever. But nevertheless, it was like, hold on, I just wanted someone to tell me everything was going to be all right. And you know, and it's 100%, 100%, I would say, our trauma that defines us as a person, male or female, is already done by the age of 5. I reckon it's already done. I mean, mine. I had some more stuff after that, but I think the foundations were already there. You know, long. I mean, some of it was even before. You imagine? I couldn't imagine the chemical reaction going on in my then biological mum. You know, with regards to not actually wanting a baby. That's got to have some sort of negative effect somewhere from some chemical or biological. You know what I mean? And then when you say about like the intelligence side of things, so many of my mates that are lunatics to some of the most intelligent guys you've ever met. You know, every and one thing I want to say about prison as well is not everyone in prison is in there because they're monsters. There are some, but a lot of people I met in prison did one thing, and it was based on impulsion. And there may have been something else going on at the time, or it could have just been wrong place, wrong time. But there's so many people in prison that have done just that one thing wrong, and they're holding their hands up to it the same as I did with mine. But then you get, like you said, you get stereotypes, you get labelled. You're an ex-con, you're a prisoner, and that I don't care what anyone says, that stays with you for life, and it
Yeah.
really does. You know, and from what I want to do, that's not such a bad thing. However, I'm really struggling since I come out this time. And I haven't told anyone this, but I am really genuinely, hand on heart, I'm really struggling this time. Because when I set up Loud Impact before, I'd already been eight years out of prison. This time, I'm not even 8 months out and I'm trying to do all of this. So no one's really taking me seriously because they go, so not only did you've been in prison this time, you've been there before. Did you not know the first time, dickhead? Whereas what they don't see is how actually prison this time saved my life. And it really genuinely did. If I'd been out the day my brother died, I'd have been doing a life sentence because he was my baby brother. There's no two ways about it. All of that aggression I learned to suppress would have just all come out in one hit, and I know it would. So call that God, call that circumstance. I know what I feel. Others have got their own decisions on it. But I was in prison for the right thing. Sorry, I was in prison because I deserved to be in prison, and I did. You know, I did something wrong. I held my hands up to it. I went to prison. But the timing of everything, you couldn't have written it. You could not have written it. So then that was why, you know, a lot of people go to prison as well. And there's the and do you know what? The gangster type people are the ones in prison trying to make a difference. They're not just sat on their ass because do you know why? When they've been so busy when they're on the out, you can't sit there and do nothing. They just haven't got it in them to do nothing. So, I mean, I know loads of people that have come out and set up some really successful businesses, fight businesses, media businesses, all this sort of stuff, because there's a lot you can learn in prison. Prison doesn't have to be negative. Prison saved my life. Simple.
Absolutely. And that leads me to another thing as well, which is, you mentioned about like the faith sort of aspect and that kind of thing. And I think I'm pretty sure that was something you mentioned in your notes. And obviously at the beginning, we were talking about the angel numbers and all of this side of things. And what I'm saying is, for anyone listening to this, I'm not saying, you have to follow this path or that path or do whatever, but I am saying that the way I frame it is having an awareness that there's something bigger than us, if you like, whatever word you want to use for that. I don't people fight over the words, it doesn't matter, but there's things that happen in people's lives, in my life, and I've spoken, I've meet people from all walks of life, even with this, like 400 episodes, you start to see the patterns and the synchronicity kind of, people call it, things happen for a reason, things happen at the right time, things happen in ways you can't explain, all of that stuff you were saying, like if you went to prison, if you didn't go to prison at that time, it would be much worse when you were on the bridge. Somebody told you to come back and all of this type of stuff. And you hear that from so many people. And what I find weird is every person is looking at it thinking, well, I can't say this, or people will think I'm crazy. But actually, when you put it out there, then most other people, a high percentage of other people have had it. So then, you think, well, it's like, and that's why I'm very open about these kinds of experiences like what you've had there, I've had as well. And so have a lot of people. What do you attribute that? Do you think that's God? I mean, like, how did the faith kind of come into your life of? what that means, because I wanted to go a little bit deeper into the spiritual aspect as well, because so many people have it, but like I was just saying, they feel like they're the only one who's had it when they're not, if you get what I mean. So I'd like to.
No, no, I'm glad you're covering that because I didn't know when I'd done a previous podcast that wasn't really touched on, and for me, it's such an important factor and such an important part. Um, so I went to a Catholic school, but I didn't like the regimental side of it. For me, it felt a bit cultish, even back then. You know, why should I do this? Just because you're telling me, okay? And I was very rebellious. So if you told me black, I'm going to say white. It's as simple as that. So I then didn't really touch on my faith until I went to prison in 2010, and then I started to get out just because it's an extra day out of the cell. So I did that at first. So first I went to the Catholic service. No, not for me, not at all. Then I went to the gospel service. Well, that is just off the rail brilliant. I was up on the chairs, I was dancing away, and I was told if you go back the next week, you're probably going to get done because you was the only white boy in the chair and they think you was taking the piss. I wasn't. I was having so much fun worshiping. It was great. Okay, cool. So then I went to the C of E, which is obviously, as you know, the Church of England service, and I absolutely loved it. And where it made me really connect is because for those people that don't know, the Bible is obviously the most mass-produced book in the whole of the world ever, but it's had the least amount of translations. So you can't change those facts if they've been there for 2,000 years, and little snippets of it have changed from one translation to another. It has to be true. That's how I look at it. So then, when I started to, so a typical, this is the thing that happened to me when I was at Bullingdon. So I'm like, all right, then God, cool. If you're real, why are you letting me go through this shit and not being able to see my kids? You're supposed to be protecting me. How's that protecting me? And I'm sat there with my mate Mark, again, God rest his soul, is no longer with us. And this bit of paper went under the door. The door's closed. Come under the cell door, landed on the table. Me and Mark looked at each other and I went, like, fuck am I touching that? What is that about? And as I opened it over, you've got a visit tomorrow. Brilliant. I went, okay, cool. That was just a sheer fluke. That's fluking. So then later on, about another couple of weeks have passed, and I was supposed to have heard about my tag. At this point, the cell door's open. Now, you know, paper does not float like that, does it? It just does this weird thing. Unless it's an aeroplane, it came round the corner, down, boom, landed on the table again. Well, I freaked out. I jumped up on the top bunk with two fully grown men are shitting themselves because we don't know what the hell is going on here. I'm looking out the door. I'm thinking it's a fix. I'm thinking someone's playing with my head. When I opened it up, turned it over, sorry, you got tag, you're being released in January, blah, blah, blah. Brilliant. But then what solidified that was the screw then come in and was going to give me a pacing for going in his room and taking the letter when I hadn't. So that was two of the first biggest examples. And then when I start to sit and I think about everything I've gone through, and this prison sentence, I really did have the time to work on me, and I needed to because I was lost. And when I sat there and I started to think, and the more and more I looked into things, and especially with what had happened to Ant, he's my loss with Ant actually gave me more of a sense to work on me. Because he always used to say to me, Nigel, get clean, get this, get you've done so much with loud impact, but you need to work on you. I go, yeah, fuck off, bro. What do you know? Who are you talking to, man? You're the one that's still, who are you talking to? But actually, it made a lot of sense. And when I did sit there and I started to work on myself, I realized just how much God had actually protected me. But it allowed me these experiences. And this is the bit I couldn't happen. Sorry, this is the bit I couldn't work out. But okay, so I now know that you've been there throughout my whole life. I feel that now of every bone in my body. But what the fuck did you let me go through everything that I've been through? And I shouldn't be swearing now, but I have to word it this way because that is how I was thinking it at the time. And then I realised God's done it because there's a purpose for me now. And the purpose for me is I'm not going to be the only person to have gone through that. But there are people out there that haven't got that strength right now that I've got. So I can help them along their journey. Because our journey, we've got two roads. We've got one that's wide, that's very, very smooth, but you hit a brick wall every time you go back to the beginning. Or we've got one that's very narrow, very, very bumpy at first. And you could be trying to drive over this road in a sports car and it's just not happening. Then before you know it, when you start working on yourself, that road will smooth out completely and it will be like you're just walking and floating on air. So it does happen. And I started to realize more and more about myself in prison. Started to become a peer mentor for CGL in there. Started to write programs about addiction. Started to write my journals. I've wrote testimonies about my journey with God, because the stuff that's happened in my life, there is one reason and one reason only that's happened, and that is a power outside of my own. And for me, that is God. There's no other way that could have happened. I started to see things now through the lens of Jesus, and I'm very grateful, and I'm proud to be able to say that. And like in prison, I was reading the book Tough Talk. I don't know whether you've read that. And Ian McDowell and 2 seconds, Ian McDowell and Arthur Wright, and they've now sent me these because we've been liaising, because their story is very much similar to mine. Or sorry, mine is very much similar to theirs. And I just think to myself, you summed it up when you said, some very, very bad people that have led similar life journeys, but God has then been there, or their spiritual side has been there at the very end, and that's been what potentially has really, really saved them. They're no different. I'm no different. I know some of the biggest, baddest people I know. They're no different. I think what it is for me, and I'm throwing it out there now. The reason it never happened for me sooner is I tried to fight against it. I was like, no. How can I let something that I can't hear, see, or touch control my life? I'll make my own decisions. I'll make my own choices. And I sat in prison and went, sorry. I sat in prison and I went, what fucking good that's done you so far. And I went, okay, now it's time to give in. And when I give in, changes started to happen. Positive stuff started to go my way. The B247, because I'm not Loud Impact anymore. That went a couple of years ago. I'm still on Facebook as Loud Impact because I can't change the name, if I'm honest. But it's now B247, and I've done that. When you see the logo, the hands company is breaking the chains, which is what my faith has now allowed me to do. And the B stands for be prepared, be yourself, be aware. Brother was the one for me because I lost 2 brothers. So brothers, and the 24/7 speaks for itself. Our battles, that's another one it can be. Our battles are lifelong. All I can try and do for myself now is to be prepared to be the best version of me I can be, to support as many people as I can along their journeys. So as when I get to that door and I knock on that door, God says to me, come on in, child, you're free. You can now move on to the better life, and then I'm happy.
Absolutely. I mean, that is amazing. And I had it in mind to talk to you about it. It's absolutely incredible. And yeah, I mean, I've experienced a lot of a similar type of thing, by the way. And so I know exactly where you're coming from. Anyone listening to this who doesn't, or maybe they're starting to, they haven't yet, they will at some point. Wow. I mean, that really hits it home. That really hits the nail on the head of what you have to do. And I want to close out with one more subject as well related to that, because obviously we mustn't overlook the positive impact you are having on people now, and obviously God through you to them and everything, because I mean that's how it is. But in terms of, like, if we flip it on its head to your earlier life, where it's not just you kind of destroying your own life basically in a lot of ways, and hurting yourself. I mean, there is the impact on other people with, like, collecting debts and all this type of stuff, and drug dealing. I mean, the dormant stuff, I don't know, because a lot of people bring shit on themselves in a lot of cases, not in every case. But at the same time, with some of the other stuff, no judgment, but I'm just saying it has an impact. Whereas now you're having the positive impact, and that ripple effect is going out, and it's touching people's lives, it's changing people's lives. Even from something like this, just from talking, getting the message out there, people are thinking, man, maybe I could do things differently. Maybe there's another way. So how do you feel about that? I mean, about having the ripple now that's going out from your life, like, seeing people's lives change, seeing other people breaking those chains from the work you're doing. I mean, it must feel very good in here, but I want to go a bit deeper into that, because that's like beautiful and powerful work that you're doing.
I'll be honest. Someone said something to me once before, and I went, no, 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 of course not. And then when I sat there, I thought, actually, they're right. But mentoring, supporting, helping, however you wish to call it, other people is a very selfish thing to do, but for the right reason.
Mm,
Because all the time you're helping other people directly, we don't think about this, but it helps us. And it does help me, because every time I get to be able to discuss my past and like now the growth in which I've had, it gives me an opportunity to lose a little bit more of the old and allow a little bit more of the good to come into my brain, into my soul, and into my heart. But actually, what really fundamentally makes a difference is when you see the growth within others. And I tell you, the biggest thing for me was when I was in prison. Obviously, I was mentoring while I was in there. Excuse me. I moved to three different prisons. I ended up in an open prison, and but what I'd noticed is actually when I started to say to people I was going to do stuff, near the end of my sentence, they actually started to believe me, and I mean my own family. So people that are struggling at the minute with addiction, with a way of life, with something that isn't right, that's damaging others, when we lose those people close to us, we think they're gone forever. What I didn't realize, and it's very important, this is a very good message to get out there to those that are struggling right now, is self-preservation is key. So to those of us that think our family are gone and they're gone forever, they're not. Right. And I do mean this. There'll be some bridges you'll burn that you can't ever have back, but the genuine friends, genuine family that are there, that have been there for you, they might not be there right now, but there's two reasons why. A, most importantly, they don't want to see you deteriorating and going down this path that you're going down. But B, and what's more important to them, is they don't want to be a witness to it because it hurts them as well. So it's taken me my whole life of all the fuck ups to realize actually I was damaging these people in more ways than I ever imagined. But that can be flipped. And now they are so much more excited about when things are going good than what they were before anything had gone wrong because they'd seen the road. You know, they had the good path before anything major was happening. Then we had this mass road of destruction, but now they're starting to see a glimpse. And I say it's like a train coming out of a tunnel. You can just about see that light starting to come out now. And when you start to witness that and you really start to feel that, because the biggest thing that we need to have in our life is belief. Now, with mine, my belief is in God, my belief is in my family, and my belief is in myself. And some may argue that should be a different way round. God is always going to be my first belief because I've even recently, I've still been doubting. And anyone that's got a faith, they will doubt it. That's the whole reason, that God wants you to pray and God wants you to say all this stuff and wants you to use him as a father because I've never had a positive male role model. So now all of a sudden I find myself on my knees, and I mean on my knees, going, God, what's going on? Come on, help me out here. So yeah, what I think is very important to get across is A, you're not the only one on this journey. If there's people out there struggling, you're not the only one that's struggling. And someone I spoke to today, I didn't even realize they were struggling because you can look really, really good on the outside, but inside you're distraught. And inside you're destroyed. No one knows what happens when you go inside and shuts that door other than people that are living inside that door. Yeah, that makes sense. So what I want to try and say, guys, is there's a lot of people out there that will support you. And there's a lot of people out there that will just listen. And I mean, Liam, you're doing an amazing job by getting the message out there to people because without people like you doing it, no one's going to be hearing it. And you're 444 episodes in, mate. So you've got to be doing something really, really good to keep that going. So, and I think that's really important for you to take some recognition for that as well, because you must enjoy seeing the people grow and seeing the strength that's then in with everyone on their journeys, because you see it probably more in some cases than what I do.
I see it a lot, but you know something is even the path that's led me to here, and it's a long story. I'll tell you another time. But even the path that's led me to doing this is, it's God as well. It's a divine plan. It's not something where I set out in the beginning and saying, look, I'm going to be doing this. Now I always had a feeling in my heart to get the message out there with words, and I've always been, quite a good talker, and I've always been that type of thing. Same similar thing to you though. When I was in school, that wasn't recognized, that was discouraged. There's a whole story there. But I've always been naturally good with words, and I always knew I wanted to do something with it. But then when you look at the way my life was before, very different. And the path that kind of led me to doing this was all divine intervention, and there's a whole story there as to how it happened, and to some extent what kept it going as well. Because even on the times where I've wanted to stop, and I mean, burnout is a real thing. We were talking about that earlier, and I think, man, I don't know how much more of this. I love it, but I don't know how much more of this. You always have those lulls. Then something's picked it right back up and kept it going, and then I get the fire straight back and think, right, okay, never mind. Can't believe I felt that way. I'm doing this. So it's always very much like what you're saying there. It's the same type of thing of things led me to here. But I really appreciate the kind words. And, I always say when we do these talks that if it touches even one person, then, we've done our work. Now, with this, I know it will be more than that. But at the same time, I say that to kind of illustrate the point that it will touch the right people at the right time. So, like when you were in there, and at that certain point in time, you were ready to hear some of this stuff, and you were ready to look into yourself, because a lot of the answers are within us as well. We just don't want to look there. And even what you were saying about like the paper, and I've had so many physical manifestations of this that are quite freaky, and I've kind of got used to it now, in a sense that I'm always grateful for it, but it doesn't freak me out like it used to. I think, oh right, that's one of those, and they happen periodically every so often. It's there's so many lessons in here, and I'm amazed, because I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface with your life, but we've ticked the two boxes I wanted to kind of tick, which is basically like, the entertaining stories, the roller coaster. I mean, because that is there, and then the lessons behind it. So people have the entertainment and they have the education, and those two things side by side. I'm well happy with that, and yeah, I mean, we can always do another episode next year or something. I'm very open. You should write a book. You should definitely put some of this down in that type of format. I don't know. Have you done that, or is that something you're planning to do? One,
I'd love to do it. It's if I you can't see it, but on here I've got my list of things I wanted to do, and at the top was podcast. Then
yeah,
it was journal. So I wrote a journal for all the time I was in prison. So I've
okay,
started to type that up because I think that would be quite good for people to see. And then the other one was game over, and it was the book I wanted to write about myself. But I wouldn't even know how to do that. I'd need so I'm not very gifted when it comes to, and I've tried using the speech thing on Microsoft, but that doesn't really help. I wanted to finish off my 8-step program, which I've done. Um, Fitness, I mean, and these were what I wrote genuinely on the 24th of the 8th. So that was prior to getting released from prison. Train Teddy, book on fighting and coaching, peer mentoring. I've written a short film. I'm waiting for someone to try and do something with that. And the biggest one at the bottom was stay humble. So, but I mean, yeah, I would love to be able to, because one of my friends, Steve Lestrange, he wrote a book, and but he had the money and the backing behind him to do it. Whereas I'm not in a position to do that yet, and I'll pray on it, and when it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But it would be nice to get that out there, because not only that, I don't know whether I've said, but I've actually been diagnosed with brain damage as well. So what I'm always a bit fearful of, and I mean, if you could see my office here, I've got stuff scattered everywhere, or post-it notes and stuff like that, because I worry about forgetting. So this is why a podcast like this is amazing, because all of a sudden you instigate something in my brain, and I go, "Oh, I've forgotten about that." Boom, and I can talk. Boom. My ideal would be, if I was to get something like a book out there, to just talk like this, and someone else go, and I go, "Right, you have this side of that, you have this side of this," and it gives me because all I would want to get it out there for is to help people to learn, to grow, to understand that they can and they will strive to be the best version of themselves. But the actual dream, do you want to hear this? Not many people have heard this. The dream would be is to set up a retreat to get people away from, ironically, as we're talking about this, but away from technology, to work on themselves out in nature. Because I love nature. Nature for me is a massive reset. And, just to get communication skills going again. And more importantly, to get people away from the negative influences in their life. Because, like I said, we don't wake up one day and go, "I'm going to fuck my life up today." It just doesn't happen. Um, so yeah, but I haven't shared that with many people. So there you go. That's the dream.
well, that's some incredible ideas there, my friend. And I believe they'll happen the right time, and the right people come into your life with the guidance. But at the same time as that, people also have to remember, and this, but people listening have to remember that it also only happens when you're out there. I mean, you have to be, when it comes to like God and this type of stuff and meeting the right people and synchronicity. You have to be out there doing it, talking about it, meeting people, meeting the right people, sometimes the wrong people, or accepting that like sometimes it's something that appears to be a misfortune. You do something, it doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen the way you thought, but then that steers you right in a direction of where you should be. Except if you didn't do that first bit, you wouldn't have had the second bit. And people are sitting at home waiting for it to like roll up on their doorstep and stuff. And I'm not saying like when you just for anyone listening to this, because I'll have to go in a minute. I'm not saying that when you have faith, like your bed makes itself in the morning or anything like that. I mean, we all still have challenges. I mean, we all still have like. I don't want people sitting here with me even thinking, look, my curtains open themselves in the morning. I mean, you have to put in a lot of work. You have your struggles, you have like your doubts and all the stuff. But at the same time, there's like life takes on a whole new meaning. My friend, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to say to all of our audience, anyone who wants to get involved to help you, reach out to Nigel, guys. He's super accessible, super easy to find. Connect with him. People can have a chat with you. But I just want to say, honestly, I knew this would be good. I had a feeling it would be good. I saw your interview with Robbie Owen. Big shout out to him. He's an inspirational guy. And I just thought, you know what? I gotta get you on the show, Nigel. But honestly, this has been better again than what I thought it would be. I really do mean that. And I just want to thank you so much for just speaking from your heart and everything, and just being you, basically. That's what I think.
Appreciate the opportunity, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.